Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Sontag, and I work as a youth counselor for Indiana Vocational Rehabilitation Services. The topic I'm going to cover today is PREETS, which PREETS is an acronym for Pre-Employment Transition Services. I work in the Indianapolis area and surrounding counties. There are 8 people in the state of Indiana that do what I do. So there's 8 youth counselors, and we each have our own particular geographic areas. I'm going to start today with a short video, kind of an animated video about vocational rehabilitation services. But I want to make sure you understand voc rehab services are about preparing people and helping people find jobs, people of all ages with disabilities in the state of Indiana. So this video talks about those services, and at the end it mentions a little bit about PREETS. PREETS is specifically for students between the ages of 14 and 22, so I don't want to confuse people by showing this video, but I think it's a good for everybody to see the basic Indiana Voc Rehab Services video. So after the video, I'll talk particularly about PREETS. So that's kind of the intro. So we'll start with the video.
Okay, give me just a second here.
Vocational rehabilitation. Indiana Vocational Rehabilitation, sometimes referred to as just VR, is an employment program for high school students and adults with disabilities. If you have an identified physical, mental health, or learning disability, VR can help you gain skills, find a job, start your first career, or discover a new one. VR can even help you if you already have a job but are struggling to keep it because of your disability. How does it work? First, you need to be referred to VR so they know you're interested in their services. We'll talk more about referral in a minute. Next, you'll meet with VR to complete an application. VR staff will then see if you are eligible for VR services. Bring any relevant medical information about your disability to your first appointment. VR may also ask you to participate in some evaluations. Don't worry, VR will pay for any medical or other type of evaluation they might need in order to determine your eligibility. Once VR determines your eligibility, you'll work together to develop an individualized plan for employment. Sometimes you will hear that referred to as your plan. You may also do some activities to learn about different types of careers and what works best for you. For instance, you might visit job sites to explore your interests and skills, or talk to employers to learn about specific careers. Is that it? With your plan guiding you, you'll work with your counselor and possibly other service providers on things like writing a resume, interviewing skills, and on actually searching for a job. The last step in the process is case closure. That happens after you found a job, worked there for at least 90 days, and you and your counselor agree that things are going well.
Am I eligible for VR services too?
You're eligible if you have a physical or mental condition that makes it difficult for you to work, and if VR sees you need and could benefit from VR services.
Even if it doesn't look as if I have a disability?
Yes, even then. VR helps people with lots of different disabilities, like autism, physical impairments, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, Parkinson's. They also help people who are deaf or hard of hearing, blind or visually impaired, and people with less obvious disabilities like learning disabilities, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, or bipolar disorder.
Will everyone who applies to VR receive services?
If VR doesn't have enough resources, they may need to serve people through a process called Order of Selection. Under Order of Selection, VR must first provide services to people with the most significant disabilities. Those with fewer needs may need to wait for services. Your VR counselor will let you know if VR is operating under an Order of Selection when you apply for services, and will tell you what this might mean for you. You should apply for VR even if an Order of Selection is in place.
How will VR know that I need services?
Anyone can refer you to VR. Teachers and family members will often make a referral for a high school student. Medicaid waiver case managers also sometimes refer individuals. You can even refer yourself by contacting your local Indiana VR office.
If I'm eligible, what services could VR provide?
That will depend on what you need in order to work. Services may include, but aren't necessarily limited to, vocational guidance and counseling, job placement assistance, training and education, medical services, assistive technology, including devices like speech-to-text software, or special keyboard or screen readers for your computer.
Is there anything I can do now before I leave high school?
Yes, high school students have another option. If you're still in school, you can participate in pre-employment transition services or pre-ETS. Pre-ETS can help prepare you for the transition from school to employment or to college or training after high school, depending on your individual needs. Services could include career exploration, work-based learning experiences, job readiness training, counseling on enrollment in post-secondary training, and self-advocacy instruction. If you're a student with a disability between the ages of 14 and 22, you may be able to participate in one or more of these 5 pre-ETS activities. You can receive pre-ETS even if you don't apply for VR. Find more information at this website.
But how much does all this cost?
There's no charge for VR services or pre-ETS. However, VR does use other funding from things like insurance, Medicaid, or federal student aid to help pay for certain costs.
What if I have a job and it doesn't work out? Will VR still help if I'm laid off or get fired?
Contact your VR counselor. If appropriate, she or he can reopen your case. You can work together to find out what went wrong, if anything, and find another job.
It all sounds good. What are my responsibilities?
When you come to VR, you'll tell your counselor about your interests, strengths, and anything that you might need to be successful at work. You'll also help your VR counselor create your individualized plan for employment. Then you'll need to make some choices about your job goals. What kind of work you'd like to do, how many hours you want to work, and whether you'd like to work with a team or on your own. Be prepared to answer questions and to ask some of your own.
How do I contact Indiana VR?
Indiana VR has several local offices around the state. You can find an office directory online at the link shown here, or pick up information about VR at your high school guidance office, the Office of Disability Services at your college, or your local Work One office.
All right, so you've got the first screen up first.
Yes.
All right, so again, I'll reintroduce myself. I work as a youth counselor in the Indianapolis area. Can you go to the second slide? And there's a little bit of history about pre-ETS.
Yeah.
All right, so the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act was signed into law in 2014. And part of that law designated federal money to start pre-ETS services in the various states. So pre-ETS, again, is pre-employment transition services. So pre-ETS really isn't to actually help students find jobs. It's help prepare students to find jobs. And we serve students in the state of Indiana between the ages of 14 and 22 that have a documented disability. In that most cases, it's someone with an IEP or a 504 plan. And even if they don't have either of those, if they have some kind of documented disability, they would be eligible for services. You can go on to the next slide. I keep thinking I'm going to see it and I don't. So do you have pre-ETS requirements? Is that the page we're on?
Yes.
Okay, so there are really 5 areas that we focus on for pre-ETS. The first is job exploration counseling. So that's really working with a student to just help them evaluate what their interests are. And it might be using some type of career assessment activity. And then, and it's really not to narrow down just one area. It's really to open the students' eyes to what a lot of possible careers or jobs could be for them as they progress through high school and after high school. It's also taking a look at local employers in their area or exploring any interests the student may have. The second area is work-based learning experience, and that's where the career counselor that conducts these services would actually go out into the community with the student to actually do a variety of topics. So maybe doing a tour of a company, maybe doing a job shadow, might be actually volunteering or an actual paid work experience that is temporary, but it's to get the student some actual experience outside of school doing some type of work, and ideally it would be done in multiple locations so that they get a variety of experiences. The third area is counseling on opportunities for enrollment in post-secondary education. So this is where the career counselor works with students to, if they're interested in going to school or some other training after high school, it's evaluating those. And some of this might have started up in the job exploration category. It might be exploring what's the training required to get to the job you were interested in from your career assessment or some of those investigations. A lot of times the students or the career counselors and the students will look at the websites for various colleges or training programs in the area, or actually go out and visit them and make contact with the actual schools or training centers. Workplace readiness is the fourth category, and that is more soft skills, general skills, how to get along with people, how to dress for work, just basic skills about being on time, communication skills. So all of our career counselors or coaches have a wide curriculum of programs to choose from, different activities to help their students, and they kind of pick the particular ones that apply to the individual students they work with. And the fifth group is instruction in self-advocacy. So a lot of times this is reviewing a student's IEP with them to just help them understand what an IEP is. Sometimes students don't understand what that is. It also talks about how to disclose a disability to an employer or to someone else in the community. And then it talks, the career coach works with the students talking about how would you request an accommodation. In our previous speaker's presentation, it talked about accommodations. This part of the program would help the students learn about how to do that and things like that. Next slide, please. So I wanted to review, there's a particular definition for students with disabilities, it could be, so this slide really compares students and youth with disability. So in Indiana, a student with a disability means that an individual with a disability in secondary or post-secondary education between the ages of 14 and 22. So it actually, people can receive pre-ed services all the way up to their 23rd birthday. Sometimes federal law defines these things differently. So in Indiana, that's how pre-ed's requirements are defined, 14 to 22, and you have to be a student with a disability. A youth with a disability, the definition is a little bit different. It's between the ages of 14 and 24, and you may or may not be attending school. So a student with disability also is a youth with disability, but not necessarily vice versa. Okay, next slide, please. So something I want to make sure everybody understands is these pre-ed services are contracted out to providers throughout the state. So in the state now, there are 12 different contractors that have career coaches that actually go out and do these services with students. And I guess I should explain that. Most of our services are performed at the local high schools. I'll give you an example of usually a career coach would go into a high school once a week or twice a week or once every 2 weeks. Every situation is a little bit different, and work with students for like one of their class periods. So when a career counselor gets started at a high school, when students are referred, then they kind of see where their schedule would allow for a pre-ETS period where they would meet with the career counselor to go over some of these activities. So there are 12 different contractors throughout the state, and each of those contractors actually work with some other subcontractors. So there's really more than 12 providers that do these services, but the contracts are held by 12 different companies. 10 of them have, so all of our 92 counties are divided into 10 different areas, and 10 of those vendors cover part of the state. So we have coverage in all 92 counties. Right now we have programs in over 400 schools. 2 vendors go all over the state, and that's Hands on Autism and InSource. They provide services all over the state for a variety of particular activities. Next slide, please. So this pre-ETS basics handout pretty much says everything that I covered already. A copy of this handout is in the resource section for in the conference materials. So I've pretty much gone over these. I just wanted to show that the pre-ETS basics handout is in the resources. And the next slide shows a map of Indiana, and it lists all of on the second page, which you don't see now, but it's in the resources, shows all the different providers and what counties they cover and how to contact them. So you can keep going to the next page. This page pretty much talks about how to enroll in pre-ETS. Normally, this comes through the individual high schools. And so if you have a student, if you're a teacher or a parent or a provider, if there's a student you think that would benefit from pre-ETS, you talk to someone at the local high school. And if that doesn't work, obviously you can contact me, or at the end of this presentation, there's a pre-ETS website or email address that you can email your inquiry to. Normally when somebody, there's an application page, which is very simple to fill out. And then there's a consent form that needs to be signed by a parent, especially if the student's under 18 or they have, they're still their guardian, that we need consent from the parent. And that gives us access to the IEP or 504 plan and allows us to start services. So the last slide on this presentation just shows actually the website for Voc Rehab, and it also shows the email address or the email and information for pre-ETS for Indiana. So that's the presentation. Like I said, I can talk specifically about how services normally are provided. So I live in the Indianapolis area. I don't know if you want to get back to the original screen and I can get my face on the screen, but that's the end of the PowerPoint. Hopefully I can get my face on the screen. I don't know if I can or can't right now.
You're there.
Okay. So I think I said I'm in the Indianapolis area. I work with a provider, and a provider in this area is Easter Seals Crossroads, and then they have some other companies, providers that work with them. But we work with, we have a program underway at the Indiana School for the Deaf. We have a program underway here in Indianapolis at the Indiana School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. I will say when a student enters pre-ETS program, there's a intake rubric that has a lot of questions to identify what the individual students' interests are, but also what their disability and barriers to work are. And by going through that intake rubric, the career coach then can kind of pattern what services that they feel are best suited for the individual student. Most of the services are provided one-on-one with a student and the career coach. I would say at some schools, though, we do have a lot of group lessons where it may be a small group of students with disabilities that they go over, especially instruction and self-advocacy, some of the topics that the counselor presents. Some of it is done in group sessions, but most is done one-on-one. But the actual services are supposed to be geared toward the individual's needs and the individual's goals and interests. And obviously that changes over time. We have students start as early as their freshman year in high school. I would say there's a few that are in middle school at 14. I would say most of the services are provided more for sophomores, juniors, and seniors. We do have people that are still in high school, all the way up to that 22 age limit. I will say all the way up to 23, really. While they're 22, they can still receive services. Most of our students, I'd say 99% are high school students, but we do have some instances where students have pre-ETS while they're in high school and they go on to college, and the career coaches still work with them, usually on a limited basis, but even if they're in college, they can still receive these services all the way up to their 23rd birthday. So I'm kind of repeating myself, but there's a wide curriculum available to the career coaches, and they kind of pick and choose what individual resources they use and activities they conduct share with the students to try to best help them with what their particular needs are. The career counselors do communicate with the teachers of record normally at the high school and share information with them. Also, they obviously share with the parents of the student if that's appropriate, so that they're kept up to date on what activities are going on. Some students do receive pre-ETS and regular VR services. If your student is interested in pre-ETS, it's important to have them apply for pre-ETS. That the requirements for pre-ETS is a little narrower than regular VR services. So if somebody would apply for VR services and they're not eligible or put on the deferred list, they would not be eligible for pre-ETS if they haven't already started pre-ETS. So if anybody involved in this has a student that they feel is interested in pre-ETS, it would be important to get them through the intake and application process before you would start the VR process. But we do have students, especially seniors in high school, that have pre-ETS services and do start regular VR services and start that process of actually preparing for a job. So I'll kind of stop there, see if there's questions. I cannot see the chat box, so if somebody has questions, Lisa, you're probably gonna have to read them to me.
Okay, we don't have anything in the chat box yet. I did have a question. If
Okay.
you have a student who's being homeschooled, how would they be able to access these services?
So if they're enrolled, I mean, so there's Indiana Connections Academy. I know we have students. So if they're homeschooled, there's obviously they're still considered a student by the state of Indiana. I think that would be a matter of just contacting pre-ETS at that email address and expressing that the student is interested, and then we would work with the local provider, whoever that would be, to arrange for how services could be started. I'll show you my ignorance a little bit. If somebody is homeschooled, they still are considered a student of the state of Indiana. Somehow you're completing those requirements, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I should add to that. They would be a student with a district, so they would go through their district then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In this case.
Yes, they would certainly still be, yes, correct. So they would still be eligible. It's just a matter of making somebody that might be my manager at the main office in Indy, that he sees those emails at that address. Again, that PowerPoint should be on the resource page for VR as a vendor for this event. If not, Lisa can provide that email address, or she can steer you to me. And if you're interested, Lisa can steer any of you to me. And if I don't have the correct answer or it's not in my area, I obviously will connect you with the right people to get that started.
Casey has a question.
This is Casey speaking.
Yep.
I just wanted to ask, so I'm curious. So I was mainstream through school. I never had an IEP or anything like that. However, they just put things in place by, okay, they allowed me to sit towards the front of the room, that type of stuff. So would I have been considered a student eligible for pre-ETS? I have a hearing loss. At the time, I didn't know that I had vision loss, but so how does that work for someone, because unless it's not considered significant.
So if somebody has an IEP or a 504, that's easy to I'll say prove, and I'm not sure that's the right word, but if somebody doesn't have one of those two, with some information from your parents or a doctor, it certainly, so the case you explained, I think you would have been eligible. It's just a matter of getting that information from when you were in high school from your parents or from a doctor with what those barriers were for you at that time.
Okay, thank you.
And if somebody's not sure, certainly ask, and then we can work through those to determine if you're eligible or not. Don't hesitate to ask, even if you don't have some of those formal documents. If you feel that you could benefit from pre-ETS services, it's worth going through that process to see, to find out.
Does anybody else have a question or comment for Steve?
And I will be part of the 12 o'clock session. I will actually be joining in the session with, there's a VR counselor that's going to have an open session for questions, and at the booths or the vendors session, I will be participating in that. Also, if somebody has a question.
Looks like we have a question from Denise asking, does VR initiate setting up the job shadow or work experience based on the student's interest after the student is deemed eligible for services?
Okay, so if we're talking about pre-ETS, the pre-ETS counselor would work with local employers. That's part of what I do on my job, is trying to make connections with local employers and then have those options available to the career counselors to contact them and schedule job shadows. As far as regular VR services, it's a little bit different, but it's also done by the VR counselor or the job coach that's helping someone look for a job. So in either case, it's the provider that finds those job shadows. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it
I-
did.
As
Yes,
far
it
as
did.
while students are still in high school, a lot of those job shadow type activities, a lot of that is done over like fall break. We've had people going out and visiting local employers, or over Christmas break. And then even in the summertime, summer vacation is, even though school's not in session, there's a lot of that kind of activity done during those periods. That's where the bulk of those activities are done, rather than pulling them out of school during school days. But both happens, but during the breaks is when a lot of that happens, that work-based learning part of it.